My name is MujeebKazi, and I am the president of North Texas Islamic Council, which is councils of organization in North Texas, comprised of 124 masajid, 60 organization. I take your message very seriously, and inshallah, I will coordinate with all our imams in North Texas to make sure the message goes out from the core of their hearts, not just the lip services, inshallah. That's my promise to you, inshallah. That's the action item that I have for myself, and I do want to have that action item for you as well, because we are so blessed and fortunate to be in a country where we can voice our opinion, where we can talk about these very core issues. Countries like Pakistan, Middle East, and other parts of the world, you cannot even raise the voice for the people of Palestine, people of Kashmir, because dictators have taken over the countries. And people who want to raise the voices, they are put in the incarceration camps or in the jail. And that is the dilemma that Muslim communities are facing right here. We are so blessed. We need to be grateful and be thankful that at least we are living in a country where our voices can be heard, where we can speak our mind, where our opinion can be shaped. And like programs like Brother Nihad was mentioning, we can take them forward. Now let's come back to the issue of Kashmir. I am from Kashmir. I became Kashmiri actually on August 5th of 2019. And the reason I became Kashmiri because I was in Kashmir when India revoked Article 370 and 35A. I thought my land was taken away from me because the Pakistan Air Forces was getting their station set up not even a mile from where I live. I thought, what can I do as an individual to raise the voices for Kashmir? So I thought I will take part in the protest, go out, speak to the cities, and I did that. And then COVID happened. What do I do then? Then I opened up a digital platform, VOKTV, where I did not give up since then. So day in and day out, I tried to raise the voice for the people of Kashmir. But here is the dilemma. The moment you mention Kashmir, the moment you mention Gaza, the moment you mention Palestine, the algorithm is structured in a way that the reach goes down. So the only way we can do it, keep pressing it, keep liking it, keep sharing with it. So next, our esteemed speaker is going to talk about the issue of Kashmir, festering wound in the Muslim collective conscience. People of Jammu and Kashmir have been demanding the rights of self-determination for over 78 years, and India has denied it. But Kashmiris have not given up on their rightful struggle. They are persistent. They will continue to pursue the resistance until their self-determination is granted, until they are given the right to make a choice whether or not they want to be independent or be side of the either country. Recently, we have seen this conflict is so dangerous that two nuclear powers were almost at the verge of nuclear war. Had the President of the United States not intervened, war could have been escalated. So this is the conflict that is boiling it up. Unless this core issue is resolved, we will not be able to get anywhere. We are risking the life of not only 2 billion people who live in the region, 3 nuclear powers head to head over the issue of Kashmir. That must get resolved. So with that, I'm going to invite our esteemed scholar, an academician, a professor, mashallah, such a young man to be with so much accomplished degree. He is a professor at the Arizona University. Mashallah, he has written books. He has authored so many articles. If I start going on his bio, it will take away a lot of time. But with his permission, I would like to welcome him to ask him to share his knowledge about the Kashmir with us. With that, my beloved Professor Khaled Beydoun.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. It's a distinct honor to be here with my co-panelists, with Safa Zarzour, who's going to speak on Syria, and of course, Nahed, who's been a real pioneer and trailblazer when it comes to Muslim American civil rights and establishing what I think is the preeminent Muslim civil rights organization in the United States. And when we think about charting a future for Muslim America on the political, legislative, and intellectual front, CARE is always the first organization that comes to mind. It's great to be here back at ISNA. I haven't been at ISNA in about 4 years. Unfortunately, this moment, is sort of intersecting with very bleak times, very genocidal times around the world. Obviously, we all know what is taking place in Gaza. We know what's taking place in Sudan. We also know what's taking place with our Uyghur Muslim brothers and sisters in East Turkestan, and obviously Kashmir. My talk, and I'm going to be brief, brother. I'm a law professor, so I'm really glad Dr. Nahed mentioned that we need to curate and condition future Muslims to be attorneys, because many of our civil and human rights challenges that are really significant lay on the horizon. So we're going to need more Muslim lawyers in the coming years, in the coming decades. Brother, I teach law, and I'm very long-winded, so please tap me if I'm speaking for too long, because I have a tendency to speak very long. I'm here to speak on Kashmir, and to be frank with you, one thing I've really realized when speaking on Kashmir to not only Muslim communities, but to lay and general audiences beyond the Muslim community is everybody is literate and knowledgeable when it comes to Palestine, right? There's general literacy when it comes to what's happening in places like Sudan. However, there's really shallow and emaciated and frivolous, trivial knowledge when it comes to what's happening in Kashmir, even amongst Muslims. If you were to survey, if you were to quiz, if you were to test Muslims, with the exception of Kashmiri Muslims, about their knowledge in Kashmir, it would be very shallow. And to be frank with you, that's an indictment not only on the Muslim American community, but the indictment on the leadership. And when I say leadership, it's an indictment on the imams, it's an indictment on the scholars, it's an indictment on the political leaders, because it is incumbent upon us all to not only be literate and educated on Gaza, it is incumbent for all of us to be knowledgeable and conscious as to what's happening in real rolling time right now in Kashmir. I had some coffee earlier, so if I get worked up, my apologies. I want to use my 10 minutes, with the broader theme of this sort of lack of literacy on Kashmir to provide you all with a lesson, with an overview, with a very kind of summarized snapshot into what's been happening in Kashmir for the last 4 to 5 years, but also the last decade. All of us can walk away today with two things, right? The first thing is you all have a working knowledge as to what's happening in Kashmir. And second, so all of us can function as ambassadors, as educators, to our communities, to our families, to our masajid, to our colleagues, as to what's happening in Kashmir. And that's my objective. One thing I want to flag as to why it's really important for me as a non-Kashmiri to be vocal on Kashmir is because every time a Kashmiri speaks on Kashmir, there's a paradox in place that as a consequence of Kashmiri brothers and sisters who live here in the United States speaking up on the issue, they're putting their family members in Kashmir in danger. So they don't have the liberty, they don't have the freedom, they don't have the latitude to speak on this issue as much as non-Kashmiri Muslims have. So what does that say? That communicates to all of us who are non-Kashmiri that it is a greater obligation, the burden is more immense on all of us to speak up on behalf of our Kashmiri brothers and sisters who, as a consequence of being punished if they speak on Kashmir and their families being punished, don't have the same leeway and latitude. Can you guys all see this picture that's on the PowerPoint? Anybody knows what this picture is? I want to talk about two things. I want to talk about the power of media and talk about the power of law, right? These are two spheres in which I operate in. I teach American constitutional law, but I've written several books on Islamophobia, and that was very much my entree into this issue on Kashmir. Several years ago, this picture went viral. It became really prominent, right? This young little child, this young little toddler was sitting atop a dead carcass, a fresh dead body in Kashmir of an elderly man who was his grandfather. However, it was appropriated and co-opted by Indian media, not only Indian media, but Western legacy media outlets who refused to show this photo, but showed this photo. Why did they show this photo, you might ask, of an Indian soldier, not only an Indian soldier, but I'll talk a bit more briefly now about a colonial settler Indian soldier carrying this child affectionately, holding him, even though he was part of the troop of the Indian soldiers who had just killed that elderly man, his grandfather. And this photo went viral. This photo eclipsed this previous photo and supplanted it, seeding and injecting in the minds of Western audiences, of Indian audiences, that the Indian military, which had just marched in August 2019 to revoke the special status that Kashmir had, rooted in the 1947 Constitution that India promulgated, was no more. Kashmir, as a consequence of this really new, emboldened Hindutva supremacist government in India, led by the BJP and led by Narendra Modi, had annexed Kashmir. In the same way, and again, the brother had said how Kashmir is the twin of Gaza, the same thing that is taking place right now in Gaza with the Israeli military, as we stand right now, is mercilessly bombing Gaza city with the objective of annexing, appropriating, occupying. That is what happened in Kashmir in 2019. And this was the optic image that accompanied the military annexation, conveying India, this Hindutva government, not as colonial, not as imperial, not as tyrannical, not as genocidal, but in fact as altruistic, as philanthropic, as entitled to the land of Kashmir. So when I wrote this book in 2023 on global Islamophobia, my objective was to do two things, right? To show how the broader experiment and project of the American war on terror was deploying the same ideas, the same intellectual weaponry in places like Syria, in places like Palestine, in places like Pakistan, in places like Yemen, in places like Kashmir, where Muslim identity and Muslim manifestations and movements of self-determination and sovereignty were always classified as what? What's the T word? As terrorists, right? Whenever Muslims stood up defending their land, organizing private militias, doing what they could with their bare hands, they were classified and oriented as terrorists by media and by law. And if anybody's read Noam Chomsky and Manufacturing Consent, you know that media and law and governments have this triangular relationship where they not only produce misrepresentations and misknowledge, but eclipse and overrule what's actually taking place. How law is not neutral, how law is not objective, how law is also used as an instrument and as a weapon for settler colonialism, for imperialism, for genocide and ethnic cleansing. And what is taking place right now in Kashmir is exactly that. We are living in genocidal times, not only in Gaza, but also in Kashmir. A rolling genocide, a roving ethnic cleansing taking place right now, being spearheaded by law. Article 370 of the Indian Constitution, again, was revoked in 2019, which gave Kashmir special status. No more in 2019, because this Indian government, led by these emboldened, hyper-Islamophobic leadership, presided over by Narendra Modi, arbitrarily decided to revoke it and to annex Kashmir. And let me tell you this, we have the United Nations, we have the ICC, we have the ICJ, all these lofty, highfalutin transnational human rights organizations. What did they do? The better question is, what did they not do? Because they did nothing. They allowed India and its military, its occupying military, to roll in, to trample this constitutional amendment and do away with the special status and the dreams and aspirations of self-determination and sovereignty that Kashmiris held. But they didn't stop there. They enacted new laws. The architecture of imperialism wasn't satisfied with the revocation of this long-standing constitutional amendment. They added on to that revocation with this domicile law, using law again, not as an objective, neutral instrument. I teach law, and it's been really difficult teaching law during these genocidal times because I have to stare at my students and give this lecture about how law is not always neutral, universally altruistic, how it is also a weapon used by those in power to selectively say when the law doesn't apply. It applies to Ukrainians because they're blonde-haired and blue-eyed, but it doesn't apply to Palestinians and to Kashmiris because they're brown, Muslim, and fit within this war on terror caricature of terrorism that's been deployed and disseminated for decades. What did the domicile law, 2 minutes, I'm gonna try to get through everything in 2 minutes. It's gonna be a challenge. Allows Indians to acquire land and buy land, but not Kashmiris, right? So we're seeing here the social demographic re-engineering of the population in Kashmir, enabling Indians to buy property. Then you had the Armed Forces, the Special Powers Act, the AFSPA, grants impunity to Indian military forces to essentially rule with impunity. They can shoot who they want. They can arrest who they want. They can jail journalists en masse. They can jail academics en masse. They can jail Kashmiri politicians en masse. They can crush dissent. In addition, this is a law that they arrested me from afar. This Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. So I guess I'm a terrorist in India. I'm not sure if it's a good or a bad thing. Probably a good thing, though, I'm guessing, with that government in place, right? This was also used to arrest Kashmiri activists, journalists, students with terrorism charges. The Indian government was able from afar, as a foreign government, to say that these students speaking up on Kashmir, that these brothers and sisters making films on Kashmir, that these individuals holding rallies and protests calling for self-determination were in fact terrorists. Think about that, a foreign force allowing or having the full-fledged carte blanche to demonize and vilify an indigenous people, a native people. Suppression of dissent, an entire architecture of Islamophobia, settler colonialism advanced by India to crush any hope, any semblance of hope for self-determination and sovereignty, even arresting young children for reading books in Kashmir. So the parallels of what's happening in Gaza with what's happening in Kashmir are stark. They are compelling. And even more than that, if there's one thing to take away from what it is that I told you, for those of you who follow my work, you know that I've spent almost every day of the last, 700 days speaking up on Gaza. These issues are not standalone. They are not distinct. They are not separate. They are deeply intertwined. So every time you speak up on Gaza, speak up on Kashmir. It is not enough to say free Kashmir. We all have to be literate, educated, empowered, inspired in every space that we enter, every place of worship, every classroom, every community, to speak on this issue, again, because our brothers and sisters don't have the opportunity for Kashmiri to do it. And with that, film, like the brother said, is extremely transformative. I invite you all, in fact, more than just invite you all, I assign you all tomorrow at 3:30 to go and support this film, Saffron Kingdom. There's a special screening here, a really intimate, beautiful portrayal on the perils and struggles that Kashmiri families here in the United States face as a consequence of not being able to speak up on this issue because they don't want to put loved ones in danger. So with that said, thank you so much. Free Kashmir, free Palestine, free is Turkestan. Thank you.